Last night, my son called. He said the dinner party celebrating his 30th wedding anniversary had to be canceled. His wife had caught a fever and was feeling really sick. But just a few hours later, I found myself standing outside Willow and Pine. Through the restaurant's glass window, I saw him raising a glass, his arm around his wife, both laughing heartily. Right there beside them were my daughter, my grandson, and all their friends. Everyone was there, everyone except me, the woman who gave him life. And if you're thinking, maybe it was just a misunderstanding, then let me tell you the rest of the story. My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 78 years old, and I live alone in a small house on the corner of Chestnut Street in the town of Glendale, Oregon. Every morning, I wake up before the sun. When the streets are still silent, the only sound is birds chirping in the pine trees behind my yard. I still keep my old routine: boil water, brew some peppermint tea, and place a biscuit on a small plate as if my husband Walter were still here, even though he's been gone for 8 years. Some days, just making it from the bedroom to the kitchen feels like a full day's work, but I keep everything neat. Every corner, every crack in the wall, every wobbly wooden chair, it all holds a piece of memory. This place is where my 2 children, Brandon and Samantha, grew up, where I used to slice apples for them, wash every muddy jersey after baseball practice, and stay up all night worried sick whenever they had a fever. Now Samantha drops by maybe once a month. Usually, just toss a bouquet of flowers into an old glass vase and leave. Brandon comes by more often, but not to ask. How are you, Mom? No. He comes to say things like, Mom, can you sign this paper for me? I'm working on an investment deal. Can you lend me a little money, just for a few months? I'll pay you back soon. It's been 15 years. 15 years of, I'll pay you back soon. And not once have I seen a single penny returned. But I'm not telling you this to complain. I just want you to understand. I'm not a bad mother. I'm not the kind to nag, to demand, or to meddle. I've lived quietly, loved quietly, hoped quietly, until last night. Last night was when I realized I'm no longer considered part of my own family. My son threw a lavish 30th anniversary party at the same restaurant he once told me. It's too fancy, Mom. I'd never set foot in there. And me, I was left out. A fake phone call. A made-up fever kept me at home, alone, thinking everyone was just resting. The truth. They were clinking wine glasses and eating fresh seafood under golden lights and bursts of laughter. They didn't want me there. Not because I'm old, not because I'm fragile, but because I embarrass them. They want me to be silent, invisible, as if I hadn't given up half my life for them. What would you do if the very people you gave life to shut you out like that? Would you stay in the dark, swallowing your tears? Or would you step into the light, look them in the eye, and take back your dignity? I couldn't sleep that night, not because of my usual back pain, and not because of the green tea I foolishly drank at 8 p.m., but because the image of my entire family, my son, my daughter, their spouses, my grandkids, and close friends gathered around that big round table under the warm light of a fancy restaurant, without me, kept playing over and over in my head. I tried to tell myself, there must be a reason. Maybe they're planning something special. But the little details, they don't lie. The next morning, I called Samantha, my daughter, who was always busy running her little flower shop on the corner of Jefferson Street. Did you know Kendra was sick? Brandon said the dinner got canceled last night. I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Sick? What? What are you talking about? She answered, like I had just spoken a foreign language. Their 30th anniversary dinner. You didn't go. She went quiet far too long for an innocent surprise. Oh, right. I think Brandon mentioned something about it, she said awkwardly. Anyway, Mom, I'm in the middle of prepping a wedding bouquet. I'll call you back. Okay. The call ended with a dry beep. No well wishes. No, are you okay, Mom? That afternoon, I went to the supermarket, not because I really needed anything, but because I needed to see people, hear voices, and avoid being trapped in my own thoughts. At the produce section, I ran into Doris, an old acquaintance who used to work with Samantha at the flower shop. Margaret, oh my gosh, it's been ages I heard you took the day off to attend the big family dinner. 30 years is such a milestone. I smiled, trying to keep my hands from trembling. Doris didn't know that I was the one left out of that perfect picture. I went home and sat motionless on the couch, staring at an old photograph on the wooden shelf, Walter holding our first grandson. The boy was grinning ear to ear, and Walter looked so shy, his hands clumsy but tender. Then I heard familiar footsteps. Eli, my grandson, came in through the back door. He always did because, Grandma, the breeze is nicer this way. Grandma, I left my math notebook. I've got a test tomorrow. Oh, and Dad said he'd swing by to pick it up and take you to dinner. 2. Still 7 o'clock at Willow and Pine. Same plan. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't respond right away. Eli, what did your dad say exactly? He hesitated. He called earlier today just to confirm the time. He didn't say anything else. I swallowed hard, trying to sound casual. No, sweetheart, maybe I misheard. He looked at me for a moment. His eyes knew, but he didn't say a word. He just nodded, and then I knew. No more doubt. My son had staged an entire fake illness just so I wouldn't show up. My daughter pretended not to know, and everyone else silently played along. I went to my room and opened the bottom drawer, the one where I kept all the important papers, the will, the house deed, and the letters Walter wrote back when he was still alive. One note, written in his slanted handwriting, read, "If one day you find yourself forgotten, remember that people only forget what no longer holds value to them." That's when I realized the only thing that still made me valuable to them was this house. The house I had held on to for over 40 years. The house Brandon once suggested, "Mom, you should transfer the title to me. In case anything happens, it'll be easier to handle." The house Samantha had gently pushed me to sell. "Mom, you should move into one of those high-end assisted living places. They've got care, friends, activities." No one asked what I wanted. No one asked if I could still live on my own. They just wanted convenience. If you've made it this far with me, you understand the pain isn't in the silence. It's in knowing that your own flesh and blood, the very ones whose tiny hands you once held, they are the first to push you out of their lives. If you felt something in what I've shared, don't forget to hit subscribe to the Revenge Hub to follow the rest of my journey of how a betrayed mother took back her dignity and the truth. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my dress for the 3rd time. This indigo dress was the one Walter and I wore for his last anniversary. It still fits, even though my body had grown much thinner now. I put on the pearl necklace again, which was the first wedding gift he ever gave me, slowly, without trembling hands. Every move tonight had to be clear and deliberate. I wasn't going to wait for an invitation anymore. I was going, And if they didn't want to see me there, that would be their problem, not mine. Willow and Pine Restaurant glowed like a bar of gold in the dark street. I told the driver to drop me off a little further away, not because I was afraid of being seen, but because I wanted a clear view before walking in. In the parking lot, I saw Brandon's car, Samantha's car, and Eli's. No further explanation was necessary. I walked past the side trees and stood under the canopy of leaves, eyes fixed on the large glass windows. The sheer curtains didn't cover everything. The light from inside spilled out, almost painfully bright. Inside was a round table covered in white cloth, fresh flowers, champagne, and platters full of seafood. Brandon stood at the center, raising his glass, smiling like he'd never known the meaning of deceit. Kendra, his wife, had soft curls, a tight silk dress, and one arm wrapped around his shoulder. Eyes sparkling, not a trace of fatigue, no coughing, no sniffles, no sign of being sick. Samantha tilted her head, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. Eli sat next to Audrey, their fingers intertwined, eyes glowing with youth. No one mentioned me. There wasn't an empty seat at the table, not a single sign that I had ever been a part of that picture. I stepped out from the shadows and walked straight to the main entrance. The manager eyed me curiously. "I'm here for the Harrison family," I said. "My son's new last name is Brandon Harrison. Ever since he started his own company, he liked being addressed like some big-time CEO. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Are you on the guest list?" I looked him in the eye. "I'm the mother of the host, Margaret Harrison." The man straightened up instantly. "Of course, ma'am. Please, this way." The sound of the banquet rushed out as the door opened. Laughter, clinking glasses, soft jazz. A world I used to belong to, now unfamiliar, like a stage I no longer had a ticket for. Brandon was mid-speech. 30 years together, through thick and thin, building everything hand in hand. He turned, stopped. I stood there, right in the doorway. No one clapped. No one laughed anymore. Eli was the first to stand up. "Grandma." I gave him a slight nod, then turned to my son. "You told me the party was canceled because Kendra was sick." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Brandon's voice caught. "Mom, why are you here?" "Because I didn't know my invitation had been canceled by a flat-out lie." Samantha set her glass down, her hands slowly curling inward. Kendra pressed her lips together, her lipstick beginning to smear under the candlelight. I went on. "Yesterday afternoon, I ran into Doris at the supermarket. She said Kendra looked radiant, picking out flowers for the party. No one said a word. No one apologized. I know you all think I'm confused, that I'm no longer young, but I'm still clear-headed enough to know when I've been pushed out." Brandon took a step forward, trying to smile. "Mom, tonight was just a small gathering. We thought it might wear you out. Tired." I let out a cold laugh. Did I look tired standing in line for an hour buying Kendra's medicine last week? Or when I stayed up to watch your house while you were away on business? Or when I cleaned up after the whole family came over for Christmas dinner and left everything behind? Brandon said nothing. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said, my voice lower now. "I'm here to see for myself how much my family has changed." I looked over at Samantha. "Why didn't anyone just say it if you didn't want me here? You only had to say so. Once, honestly, the way I taught all of you to be." Silence. The music still floated softly from the wall speakers, but everyone at the table was quiet. I slowly turned my back, not out of heartbreak. But because I understood, I no longer had a seat at that table. Not because someone took it, but because they chose not to set one for me. I got home close to midnight. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't make tea. I didn't sit in the usual chair by the window. I stood in the middle of the living room, still clutching my purse, eyes fixed on the old family photo hanging on the wall. Brandon, 5 years old, had curly hair that was a wild mess, standing on a stool, holding up a Thanksgiving card he had made for me. Samantha, round-cheeked, gripping the hem of my skirt. Walter, arms wrapped around the three of us. And me smiling wide, blissfully unaware of what later would mean. I walked into the bedroom and pulled open the dark wooden drawer under the bed. The house documents, an old will, and the expense ledger I've kept by hand for 15 years. Every urgent loan Brandon ever asked for. Every time Samantha said, "Mom, can you get the nicer flowers? I don't want people thinking I can't even afford a bouquet for my own mother." I wrote it all down, not to ask for it back, but to remind myself love shouldn't only flow one way. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Mr. Jenkins, I'd like to make a few changes." He was silent for a few seconds, then spoke in his calm, familiar voice. "I'm listening. Margaret, I want to sell the house, and I want to update my will entirely. Are you sure? More sure than I've ever been about anything." 3 days later, a young couple came to see the house. They brought 2 kids. One dashed around the front yard, and the other hugged a cloth pillow and asked if they could have a room just for reading. I smiled. "You can do anything you want here, sweetheart, as long as you read a lot of books." They signed the deposit that same afternoon. Good price, lovely buyers. No one bargained. No one asked where I was going. They only said, "We promise to take good care of this home. You don't have to worry." On Thursday morning, I went to the law office. I laid 2 documents on the table. One was the house sale receipt. The other was a new will, leaving everything I had left to Eli, the only one in the entire family who ever asked if I was hungry, if I was tired, or if I wanted to go to the park together. Mr. Jenkins finished reading, took off his glasses, and looked up at me. No second thoughts. I shook my head. They turned away first. I'm just walking in the other direction. That evening, I sat in my newly rented apartment, which was smaller but full of sunlight. A few old oil paintings hung in the living room. Nothing fancy, but they made the place feel like a clean slate. I wrapped my hands around the teacup. The tea tasted weaker than yesterday, but my heart had never been clearer. I've lived too long in someone else's shadow, as a mother, as a wife, as the person behind the scenes, holding things together, never as an independent woman. Now I can, even if it's late. I didn't tell Brandon, didn't warn Samantha. I knew eventually they'd find out, but I no longer needed their validation. It's time I stopped waiting for others to see my worth and started standing tall, lighting up on my own. 3 weeks after I left the old house, the news began to spread. Not from me, but from the bank. They called Brandon about the mortgage he secretly listed my name on. My name was no longer on the property record. The loan extension was denied. The house was relisted as collateral. Brandon panicked. Samantha kept calling. They both left dozens of messages. I didn't answer. That Sunday morning, I sat by the window in my new apartment, looking across the street at the park. Children were flying kites. An old lady was walking her dog. Bicycles crackled softly along the sidewalk. I held my cup of tea, leaned back into the pillow, and felt weightless. Not because I got back at someone, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I had finally learned to let go of those who no longer wished to hold me close. A week later, I went to the library, which is now unveiling a new children's reading room named after Walter Harrison. The bronze plaque gleamed in the sunlight. Kids rushed into the new room, their eyes sparkling. Reed, my grandson, stood beside me that day. "Grandma, Grandpa would be so proud," he said, gripping my hand tightly. I nodded. "So is Grandma, but this time, not as a wife, not as a mother, but because I'm proud of who I am." Samantha showed up later. She brought a bouquet wrapped with care, her eyes uneasy, like someone stepping into a place that no longer welcomed them. "Mom, I'm sorry," she said. "I pushed you out of your own life." I didn't say anything. I just placed my hand over hers and gave it a gentle squeeze. Not forgiveness, not rejection either, just a space to start again if we both wanted to. That afternoon, Reed drove me home. The car moved slowly through sun-drenched streets. I leaned my head against the window, and for a moment, I felt peace. No one said a word. No need to. Because sometimes an ending isn't in the fury, but in the silence. That no longer hurts. You're still here, all the way down to this last line. Maybe you've been left behind by your own family. Maybe you've had to quietly pack up your dignity, even when no one saw its worth. If my story made you think of someone, leave a comment. Share this if you believe someone out there needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the Revenge Hub, where we don't glorify bitter revenge, but honor the strength of those who choose to live with self-worth.